Good evening, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sandy Quinn with the Nixon Foundation, and I want you to join me in welcoming our speaker, Bruce Hershenson. He didn't want to do that. He says, I'll just go sit down. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I said, Bruce, come on. A little bit of showbiz, come on. It's okay. We have other prominent guests I want you to meet, including right over here, the former presidential helicopter pilot, the man who flew all over the world, domestically and even around the pyramids and what else? The Vatican. Colonel Gene Boyer, right here. Another presidential helicopter pilot, our good friend, Army Chief Warrant Officer Carl Burkhannon. Carl, thank you for coming. Long-time Nixon friend, former official in the White House press office, our friend John Carlson. John? A talented member of the White House team of legendary speechwriters, Dr. Franklin Gannon, right here. And a talented member of the legendary Nixon Foundation Board of Directors, the chairman, Chris Elfman, with his wife, Linda, right here. Now, the key question for this evening is, how many of you are members of the Nixon Foundation? Now, raise your hands up there. Well, C+, C-. We should have more. Now, when you leave, please drop by the table. It's in the lobby. Talk to Alice Brown, and she will acquaint you with this handsome brochure, which will tell you how to join. And you can do so for $50 or $5,000, whatever your heart and wallet moves you to sign up for. But please do, and help us do our programming, our educational endeavors, and so on. You'll be able to attend events like this at considerable savings. Also, coming up in July is our 20th anniversary. It's what we're calling our homecoming. It's a reunion. It's going to be 3 days of memorable, fun experiences, historic, because you'll be elbowing with so many members of the former Nixon White House, those who were there, like Dr. Gannon and Gene Boyer and others who were there during those important years, and they're all coming home for 3 days. Everything from a wonderful sunset reception and dinner at Casa Pacifica to a cruise aboard Nixon friend John Wayne's legendary yacht, the Wild Goose. In between, there's lunches and dinners and tours and so on, and roundtables on foreign policy and domestic affairs. So you'll see in our newsletter all the details, and I hope you'll sign up. You can do so as a package or for individual events, and you can pick up a brochure if you don't have one already, if you're not a member and you haven't found out about it, from our reception desk in the lobby. We have a series of Nixon Legacy Forums that are a centerpiece of this 20th anniversary. We have had 2 in this very room, carried by C-SPAN, for a total of 4 hours of wonderful legacy programming, one on domestic affairs, the other on the efficient use of the president's time, how he was moved and briefed and traveled around the world and the country. And the next one is on Thursday. It's Earth Day, April 22nd, and we have the people who guided the president into the innovative, sea-changing environmental pollution, energy policies that were a hallmark of his administration. And among the speakers are William Ruckelshaus, who was the first administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. It's an excellent panel. More important, it's free, and it's at 1:30 on Thursday. I hope you'll all be here. Followed by, on June 1, Dick Morris, who returns for his book that he just published a week ago called 2010, Taking Back America. It's a bestseller already. We'll have a full house. The tickets are all-inclusive. You get a book and admission, and they're for sale now in the museum store. June 1, 7 o'clock here. On the next day, June 2nd, is the fourth of our series of Nixon Legacy Forums, this one on welfare and what the president did to try and end poverty, to raise pay scales and so on. We have, once again, those who were with him in the White House who created those policies and made his vision become actual initiatives and legislation. So mark that down too. Again, it is free. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had Bruce Hershenson here a number of times, and how many of you have been here before when Bruce has spoken? So we've got some new people too. Good. Okay. He's been here for every one of our 9/11 presentations, and I hope he will be again this year. We do one every year, and they're always a full house. He's been here for all of his books. He's been here to conduct a series of weekly forums, which attracted an interesting crowd of people who came every Saturday for 6 weeks to hear Bruce stimulate a discussion about foreign affairs and for them to participate in it. And it was a great program. Bruce, we should really try and do that again. He was head of motion pictures and television for the USIA. He was selected as one of the 10 outstanding young men in the federal government. That's an extraordinary accomplishment in its own. He's traveled over 90 countries, and he keeps doing it. He's like that Duracell battery. He just keeps on going. He's had teaching assignments at universities from Whittier and Claremont to Harvard. He was a member of the Reagan transition team. You know him well as a TV commentator and a radio commentator for ABC, for KABC, for years. He was White House Special Assistant to President Nixon. He now is a professor in the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine University. Wait a minute. I forgot. It was just, no, I neglected to start this with his most noteworthy accomplishment, the one that got him the cover of Time magazine. He started as a box boy at Ralph's Groceries in Hollywood. That's the truth, too. He did that. He'll deny it, but it's true. He's a longtime friend of the Nixon Foundation, of President Nixon, who thought very, very highly of him, as does his family, as does the Nixon Foundation. It's a delight to welcome him back, Bruce Hershenson.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Sandy, and thank you. Thanks for being here. I realized that you had your choice. There was the fundraiser for President Obama and Barbara Boxer this evening, and so it really pleases me that with that choice you've come to see me. And what Sandy mentioned about the box boy, I got to tell you, those were some of my happiest days. It was just great that the job was, because in those days, this was during the Coolidge administration. In those days, boys carried out boxes filled with groceries to someone's car, and it's where I learned that if they had a Rolls Royce, I wouldn't get a tip, and if they had a Model A, I'd generally get a quarter. It's true. And I do thank you for being here this evening. As Sandy mentioned, I teach over at Pepperdine University, the School of Public Policy, what we call foreign policy roundtables. You know them well, Larry, since you've attended so many of them, and thanks for doing that. And although the class is about current events, I try not to make it a history class. It's current events in foreign policy. Whatever happened in the preceding week, that's generally what we talk about. But I try each semester to have one session, at least 3 hours, on Vietnam. And the reason that I do that is because no matter what foreign engagement we may be in at the time, there are always those people who say it's another Vietnam. It's going to be another Vietnam. It's a quagmire. I've heard it for it. They said it for Grenada. Senator Biden said it for the liberation of Kuwait. It's another Vietnam. Said it for Bosnia, Kosovo, certainly for Iraq, and certainly for Afghanistan. And so I consider it to be a current event because it becomes current no matter what we're doing militarily. And so after one of the latter part of one of the 3-hour sessions, a girl stood up in the back of the, what I call the round table. And I should tell you that all of these students are postgraduates, so they've all been to some college before they got to this course. And she stood up and she said, "At the college I attended, professor never told me all of these things. How come?" And I said about the only thing that I could say. I said, "I don't know. I don't know who your professor was, and I don't know." If I had to make a guess, I'd say either he didn't know, or he did know and didn't want you to know. And I am convinced that it was the second of those two, because during that conflict, you had college professors, demonstrators, media, most of the Congress, who were terribly opposed to really our winning the war. They were, and I'm putting it exactly the way that it was. Those demonstrations didn't have American flags. They had Viet Cong flags and they had North Vietnamese flags. And if they did have American, because some of them did, they were upside down. That was the routine. Anyway, after she said that, and I was driving home from Pepperdine, I thought, God, I gotta put all this stuff in writing, because I found out that most adults, people who were alive and well at that time, not just students who were never taught these things, but even adults who lived through them, by God, we forgot. There is an amnesia. And what alarmed her most, I went over the stuff about what Jane Fonda said on Radio Hanoi and what our prisoners of war said when they came home and what the North Vietnamese victors said, all of that. But the thing that got her the most is when I told the class that we won the war at one time. We won it. But there were those who spent the next 2.25 years to see that South Vietnam and Cambodia would surrender. Let me just go back and tell you what we achieved and how we achieved it. During the Johnson administration and years of the Nixon administration, we had been trying to get an agreement that was totally in our interest. By that, I mean everything that President Eisenhower, President Kennedy, President Johnson, and President Nixon wanted to achieve. Everything. Of course, they wouldn't sign it, and they would go to Paris to talk and then walk out of Paris, very much like present-day North Korea going to the six-party talks. They come in, they go out. It's just a routine. But what President Nixon did to bring them back to Paris and sign this agreement is he bombed the devil out of Hanoi, the capital city of North Vietnam, and Haiphong, the major harbor city of Haiphong. And when I say bombed them, bombed military and industrial targets. And there were plenty of them in those two cities. And we bombed. That was in December of 1972. If you look in a history book on Vietnam, look under C, and you'll see Christmas bombing. We still call it the Christmas bombing, except that we didn't bomb on Christmas. President Nixon had called for a 36-hour bombing halt. And it was 24 hours over Christmas, 6 hours Christmas Eve, 6 hours for the morning for the 26th. But they called it the Christmas bombing so that it would appear to be terribly inhumane. I mean, inhumane for what? An atheist government that we bomb on Christmas? But anyway, he did call a halt, and still it made no difference to the media. While this bombing was going on, the Washington Post said that millions of Americans now question the president's sanity. The New York Times wrote, it was Anthony Lewis who wrote it, that, how did he put it? I want to get the precise words. The president is acting like a maddened tyrant. Well, the president was neither insane nor tyrannical. He achieved his objective. The North Vietnamese, and we found this out later, through their own memoirs and those statements, knew they lost the war at that point. And they came to Paris, and they signed this agreement. They're called the Paris Peace Accords. It was called a ceasefire, but it was much more than any standard ceasefire. Ceasefire means just what it says, just ceasefire, no more aggression, troops left standing in their place. But this had added to it, first, a guarantee that the South Vietnamese would be able to have free elections. And as it says in the Accords, they have an inalienable right to have free elections. We then had an article that gave them every freedom that we have in our Constitution, plus. What we did was we plagiarized the First Amendment with speech, religion, press, assembly, and then we added to it anything that we could think of: freedom of movement, freedom of residence, private property, private enterprise. We had a whole slew of them, everything we could think of so that it would be in writing. Mind you, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong signed this. Then there was an article that those Americans who were being held captive, incarcerated in Hanoi, would come home. And this article, and this one I want to stress because it has very deep meaning in terms of the whole rest of this story. We recognized, by we I always mean the United States, we recognized that the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong might well violate their signatures on these documents. We were not so naive as to assume that they were not going to violate these agreements. So we put in an article that said this, that we have the right to resupply South Vietnam any military assets that they may use up, lose, whatever, or just in time that don't work anymore, but we'll do it on what we called a peace for peace basis. A peace meaning a helicopter, we replace a helicopter. If they lose a bullet, we give them a bullet. Whatever it may be, peace for peace. Soviet Union can do it with North Vietnam if they want. But in that way, we had really precisely what we wanted, with all of those articles guaranteeing the freedom of the South Vietnamese, their liberty, and that we would resupply them for anything they may lose, economically as well. Okay. The reason I say that's important is because that is what the Congress grabbed onto, realizing they have the appropriation committees. They have, between the House and the Senate, they have the vote on appropriations, and they would use that peace for peace requirement that the President signed, that North Vietnam signed, Viet Cong signed, South Vietnam signed. They would use that as a device so that it would not be successful. There weren't many celebrations when this thing was signed among the media or among the many college professors or among, certainly not among the demonstrators and not among the Congress, many of whom spoke at those demonstrations where they were carrying the Viet Cong flag in one hand and the North Vietnam flag in another. They spoke in them. These people, and there were plenty of them, had an investment in U.S. failure because their reputations were at stake, because they had said for years that we couldn't win and that we just ought to get out. That was their reputation. And so they made it their business to see, and it took 2.25 years to do it, to see to it that Vietnam, South Vietnam, and Cambodia would fall. Not so incidentally, today's April the 19th. 2 days ago was April the 17th, 35th anniversary of Cambodia's surrender, the surrender of Phnom Penh. Anyone hear anything on the news about it? Good Lord, you hear about every blessed anniversary on earth on the news. Not a word. It was the 35th. That's a big anniversary of the fall of Phnom Penh. And I'll get let me just go on with this chronology, and I don't want to be too long at it, but let me just go on with what happened. They kept on putting amendments onto legislation, the Congress did. Legislation that had nothing to do with South Vietnam, nothing to do with Cambodia, nothing. But they kept on putting amendments on those appropriations for other things, saying no more aid to South Vietnam or Cambodia. And the president would veto it. It was a back and forth. And not so incidentally, if anyone wants to look it up, the president gave a speech the night that we initialed the peace accords. It was January the 23rd of 1975, and then we signed them. You initial them first, then you sign them. Signed them 4 days later on the 27th, if anyone wants to see. It was a speech on television at night. You know, everyone could see it, everyone could hear it, but no one remembers it. It's just why I call the book An American Amnesia, because it is one. So in the doing of trying to stop the process, while all of this was going on, Watergate became a scandal. The president resigned. Gerald Ford became president. Less than 3 months after he became president, there was a congressional election, just like we're facing now in November. And the congressional election was the 94th Congress. And the 94th Congress that was elected that November was a massive landslide for the Democrats. Massive. I mean, really, much worse than we had. I shouldn't use the term worse. I'm showing my feelings, but much more than we had in the last election, and they continued to do the same thing to President Ford. But beyond that, North Vietnam wanted to test President Ford, and so they made an offensive in a very small province and waited for reaction. There was none. No aid to South Vietnam, even though they lost a good deal of equipment, and certainly no U.S. aircraft to destroy the North Vietnamese military. And then they did another offensive in a small province, and another. President Ford didn't do anything. And then they had a very large offensive in Phan Long province, big province, and it was devastating. And they won, hands down. That told them, and we learned this from their own memoirs and their own statements, that by God, they didn't lose the war when they thought they lost the war. They could go on, and they'd go on to Saigon. And indeed, that's exactly what they did. And simultaneous with that was, as I mentioned, the fall of Cambodia. In fact, it was 13 days before the fall of Saigon. When Saigon fell, that was April the 30th of 1975, I think I could sum it up by quoting with precision the statement of Senator William Fulbright, who said, "I am no more distressed than I would be if Arkansas lost a football game to Texas." That was his assessment of the surrenders of Cambodia and South Vietnam. And there were a lot of people in the Congress who felt that way. Let me just backtrack just a bit, because I want to mention this. I believe that President Ford, very good, very decent man, was like a caretaker president. The Congress was really running the show when it came to foreign policy, which is never done. The president runs foreign policy. They were running it. He couldn't get what he wanted in foreign policy. And on April the 10th, when he gave this speech, he gave us a speech on April the 10th, begging for aid, and the Congress wouldn't give it to him, and many of the members of the Congress walked out on his speech. And as I mentioned, just on April 17, Cambodia fell, then South Vietnam. But he had sent the Army Chief of Staff, a guy by the name of General Weiland, to Southeast Asia, and he had warned President Ford that they were going to fall unless we got the aid, and that's why the president gave a speech to do exactly that. Let me just mention what happened in Cambodia on April the 17th. The Khmer Rouge came in. If you were a patient in a hospital and surgery, you were killed, and so was the doctor, and so was the nurse. If you were a patient who was not ambulatory, you couldn't move, you were executed. If you could, you were taken out of the hospital and forced to march to the fields. Every urban area of Cambodia, the people were forced to move to the fields. If you talked to one another, you'd be executed. If you complained about anything, that would be an obvious execution. If they found any appliance like a radio, execute. When I use the term executed, I don't know what you're thinking, but boy, they were most of it was done by mallets and hammers on the head, while their children and the rest of the family looked on, some of them then taking their place. The stuff was just so brutal, so terrible. As I mentioned, it was somewhere between a quarter to one-third of the people who were dead. It was genocide. When the Khmer Rouge took over, you may remember a name, Sidney Schanberg. He was a writer for the New York Times, and he was in Cambodia. He wrote, "I have seen the Khmer Rouge, and they're not killing anyone." He won the Pulitzer Prize. He became a hero in a film called The Killing Fields, in which he was portrayed as a great guy. I saw the Khmer Rouge, and they're not killing anyone. If you want to talk to people who really know their stuff on this, it's a strange thing, but almost any donut shop in Orange County, they're owned by Cambodians. And if they're old enough, they'll tell you stories that are just so god-awful, but they will. If they're young enough, they generally don't know, and whatever their parents told them, they told them. It is 35 years. I'm leaving so much out. Let me just get to Vietnam with a couple of sentences. Vietnam became an archipelago of re-education camps, which is a synonym for torture chambers. It started the phenomenon of boat people. People putting pieces of wood together, anything that might float in the sea, take off on it, go. The estimates are 1 million boat people leaving Vietnam, 500,000 of which are still underneath the South China Sea. For those people who were saying peace now, They got it. That's the peace. And during the first year of the peace, more people killed than during the previous decade of war. And that's an important fact to remember. I asked former President Nixon, I said, what would you do if you were still president and the Congress wouldn't give you the aid to save that you knew it was going to fall, both Phnom Penh and Saigon, you knew they'd fall. What would you do? And he said, I'd bomb the blazes out of Hanoi and Haiphong again without the aid. And then he said, I would probably be impeached. And then he added, but so what? I would have saved thousands, then he corrected himself, millions of Southeast Asian lives. And he would have. And he would have. And it's the importance of a president being commander-in-chief and knowing what to do when real crisis is on that person. It's my hope that the book can help, at least, just help. Just being on a shelf is okay, but can help people to know what really happened and what another Vietnam really means, and that we don't ever duplicate what we did in 1975, and frankly, I'm afraid we are. Thanks. Let me ask for your questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll raise your hand, I'll bring the microphone to you. And I do see somebody in the high balcony on the left side, right here.
Thank you very much for that speech,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hershenson. So today, I'm interested in how it is, or what your opinion is of the current administration telegraphing to the world basically that you bomb us, we won't retaliate. And there's a little bit more to it than that, but if I could hear your response to that.
I think we are showing more friendship with our enemies than we are with our friends, and that we are continuing to abandon one after the other. And it is when I mentioned, President Ford did really, I have to say, and with all respect for him, there was an abandonment there of South Vietnam and Cambodia. There was an abandonment because the Congress wouldn't give them the money, but I do have to agree with former President Nixon, who had said, if I could just abbreviate it into two of the words he used, so what? You're commander-in-chief. There isn't anyone in the field. The commanders who are in the field aren't going to say, Mr. President, do you have the correct appropriations from the Congress? They're going to do what they're supposed to do. That's what you do in the military. We don't have 535 commanders-in-chief. Okay. So I felt he was weak, and then we started a period of abandonment with President Carter. Right, all the way to El Salvador, Nicaragua, the Shah of Iran. We got the Ayatollah Khomeini in return, Taiwan. Then President Reagan, no abandonment of anyone. Bush 41, no abandonment of any country. President Clinton, no abandonment. In fact, he was very good with Bosnia and Kosovo. Bush 43, of course, no abandonment. He concentrated on one thing, the security of the United States, for which I give him not just great credit, but great thanks. I live in Los Angeles. I am very pleased that what was called the Library Tower was not destroyed, as we know it was planned to be destroyed. So I'll always be thankful to him. But now we're back on the abandonment road. And when we do this, automatically our allies think, gee whiz, can we afford to be allies? Sometimes it seems to be better to be an enemy of the United States. You get more for it. And this nuclear policy of his is, look, other countries are going to think the United States isn't behind us. There are a lot of countries that you don't even think about who know that if they were attacked, the U.S. would come to their rescue. They know it because that's what we do in the United States. If I may, we're the only country that has consistently given lives for the liberty of strangers. That's what we do. And other countries, big or small, know that. But what I should say, knew that. Because now, certainly during this administration, they have to be concerned. And those countries that may be on a path of possibly getting nuclear weapons, I think they're going to get them. I think they're going to get them because I don't think that they have any faith in the United States, friend or foe, of the United States taking care of them, as we did from World War II forward. Yes. Thanks. Thank you. You bet. Yep. Very likely. When I say friend or foe, they're going to know what our current president is. I'm sorry? Yeah, he was saying, well, then will Japan become a nuclear power because they know that our nuclear umbrella is over Japan. If they were to doubt that our nuclear umbrella would be over Japan, would they not try to get nuclear weapons? I believe the answer is yes. I believe the answer is yes for a lot of countries, and that they would feel, as I say, friend or foe because they would like to be able to be a power. Friend because they'd be scared we wouldn't come to their defense. So we're doing exactly the opposite of what is claimed by the administration. We have had a deterrent, and that's what it was, nuclear weapons, a deterrent. They knew we were when I say they, the rest of the world, we were the strongest power in the world. And I use the term, excuse me, but I mean just sort of, let me just go on. I use the term were. Right now, in truth, our military is the most powerful one in the world. And we know that, and most chiefs of state know it, most world leaders know it. But they also know that we will not use the power we have. And so we're not the most powerful nation in the world. Because we won't. We fight politically correct wars recently. We worry about 2 guys who get killed in Afghanistan because they're civilians, even though there were 50 terrorists there. I mean, this is, of course, you can't win. We give a timeline. Everyone knows when we're leaving Iraq. Everyone knows at least when we're going to start to leave Afghanistan, July the 1st of next year. But this is absolutely absurd. I am old enough to remember World War II. I was a kid. But I also know that there was only one timeline, victory, period. Whatever it took, no matter how much money it took. Right now, for fiscal year 2011, the budget that President Obama has for the military, for defense, and it even includes the Veterans Administration, is 24%. That might sound like a lot to you, 24% for defense. You know what it was in the last fiscal year of World War II? 89.5%. Only 10.5% for everything else. And no one complained because we wanted to win. And we did. And we bombed the devil out of our enemies, bombed them to kingdom come. And it's still called the greatest generation because it was. And I don't know if we can win. Go ahead.
Yes, you in your book, you spent several pages discussing a USIA movie
I do.
entitled Vietnam, Vietnam. I was wondering, did you have a role in producing this film?
Yeah.
By the way, the film is available for sale on the internet.
It is? Wow. Great. Gee, that's good to hear. Yeah, that's, the films that were made on Vietnam were all against our policy. Whenever there was a film out, a documentary particularly, it was against our policy. So I very much wanted a film to be for our policy, and I was at that time with U.S. Information Agency. And so asked the greatest director and a guy who I just idolized, John Ford, greatest director really, I think, in motion pictures and cinema, to go to Vietnam and to at least play the role of a executive producer. And I asked another friend, some of you may remember Tom Duggan, to be the writer of the picture. And we made it. And we made it almost covertly, because the bureaucracy at the agency was not very high on a film on Vietnam, taking our side. And Charlton Heston narrated it, and he narrated so many pictures for us, always for a scale of Screen Actors Guild. He had to do it because he was with the Screen Actors Guild, charged something, so there we gave him a big check, taxpayer's check of $100. That was what we gave him for a session. Just a marvelous guy. Always went to Vietnam to be with the troops. Never, ever seeking or wanting any publicity. Never. Just a great, one of the great men. Anyway, John Ford was absolutely, I could bore you all night with John Ford stories, because he's one of the most unique human beings that ever lived in the world. But the answer to your question is, yeah, we made it, and we finished it started it during the Johnson administration, finished it during the Nixon administration, and as you may guess, many of the public affairs officers who are the head USIA people in the various countries of the world at the embassies and consulates wouldn't run it, and wouldn't seek a release in the country. And so it never really saw the light of day. If it's on the web, I'm glad, because that at least means someone will be able to see it. Anything else?
Oh, yes.
Please.
Please allow me to be direct with a twofold question. The parallels are amazing. I can hardly wait to read the details in your book. Why are your decisions made in Europe? I taught at Kabul University, Afghanistan. There were distinguished Afghans here who loved Reagan. I've been praying for this for years.
No, please.
Can you please have a 6-week panel, not one Afghan or two, but of many Afghans that I would be happy to connect with, to have a meeting here, and let's stop having Europe make decisions on our taxpayer money, and that includes U.S. Afghan refugee citizens.
Okay, I'm sorry to tell you, I think it's because of the
I should
the
know
system.
from
I can't-
karaoke, but-
No. Your voice is clear as a bell, but I just couldn't make out the precise questions. Sandy,
Could you help have a panel with Afghans
would
to
I
help
have-
decisions
would I
be made
have
in
a panel
U.S.?
on the Afghans?
Yeah, a six-week program, and I'll get several Afghans instead of having Europe make decisions on our
I gotcha.
taxpayer money, and
It's certainly something that I think would be valuable. I can't say yes or no because I don't know my own calendar, but if there's an opportunity to do it, I'd like to. I'll put it that way. Thank you.
Right
Yeah.
over here.
Hey, Bruce. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks.
Many of us have wondered how history would be different had Richard Nixon been elected in 1960. Did you ever sense any regret from him about his having essentially inherited the Vietnam War and not having been elected in 60, where he could have set the policy and also helped with the Bay of Pigs possibly being successful instead of a major failure?
No, and he never used that word inherited. As a matter of fact, if I may, because it's a reasonable question, President Kennedy was a great admirer of President Nixon, and President Nixon admired President Kennedy. They were both friends in the Congress. This has relevancy to your question. After President Kennedy won the election, he asked Richard Nixon, the former vice president, the guy he ran against and won over, to come to the White House to go to be in the Oval Office. And President Kennedy had just had the terrible experience of the Bay of Pigs. And he wanted to talk to Richard Nixon, a former vice president, about foreign policy. And as I understand it, and as I understand it pretty darn well, because I got both sides, on one side from President Nixon, and the other side from Pierre Salinger, who became a marvelous guy. At any rate, and both, this is what happened. They talked for a good period of time, well over an hour, probably more like 2 hours, but about every area that was important at the time in terms of the Cold War. They talked about Cuba, they talked about Berlin, they talked about India and Pakistan. Indonesia was having difficulties with the United Nations at the time. I'm leaving out a number of things. But they talked about every area of the world. And President Nixon was, I call him President Nixon, he wasn't president at the time, obviously. He was sitting on an easy chair in the Oval Office. President Kennedy was pacing. He had a rocking chair, and then he would get up and he'd pace. And he was pacing, and he stopped pacing, and he looked at Vice President Nixon, and he says, "This is the stuff of presidents." And then he said, "I mean, who gives a hoot if the minimum wage is $1.15 or $1.25? Now, what I'm sure President Kennedy meant by that was, he isn't going to have the authority anyway. That goes to the Congress. When you're president, it's foreign policy, and you better realize it. I think this president in the White House today is going to be best known, for good or ill, for what he does or doesn't do in foreign policy, not domestic. Because you go back over all of the presidents from World War II, what are they most famous for? I'm not going to go through the whole list, but obviously, Kennedy was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Johnson was Vietnam. I could go through them all. For good or ill, Carter for the Iranian hostage crisis. They all come in with grand ideas and what they want, but when it comes right down to it, the final jurisdiction is up to the Congress of the United States on domestic policy. Even Obama had a heck of a time with his health care. He never got everything that he wanted, but with this majority in the Congress, he got most of what he wanted, but he didn't get it all. But if he wants to send troops, if he wants to add 30,000 to Afghanistan, he just does it. That's what presidents do. And that's what President Kennedy did in asking President Nixon. That's what President Kennedy said, in effect, by saying, "This is the stuff of presidents." And there was something else that you asked that fastened something in my head, and now I went a blank on it.
I am a soldier and survivor from the Vietnam War. I have a question. Why the Chinese invaded Vietnam 1979 after just 5 years surrender of the South Vietnam? Did United States predict this conflict?
I'm sorry? Why did China invade Vietnam in '79?
Yes.
They invaded it because there has been and I'm positive you know this, there have been enemies for quite some time. China wanted, in fact, to ensure that their people were not escaping into Vietnam. When I talked about the boat people, some of them were people who were from China who went to Vietnam and were forced to be boat people. The only ones who were forced to be boat people on a piece of wood that you could never even call a raft were the Chinese in Vietnam. There has been a good deal of antagonism between China, and whenever I say China, I'm talking about the People's Republic of China. I'm talking about the government, and I'm not talking about all people of China.
Yeah, Bruce, first of all, thank you very much. I proudly served with these men over here during Vietnam, and
Great, man.
a great supporter
Thanks.
of President Nixon.
Thanks.
My hat's off to them. I want to change my question to you. Maybe it's a little different because I feel like I'm surrounded by patriots, and it's wonderful. But what I'm really worried about is the youth of America.
Me too.
And as you as a teacher, can you give me hope through your dealings with them that we have a core of young men and women who are willing to give their lives for this country? Or do you feel like we are lost? Because I need some encouragement, because it's one thing for all of us to believe in this country, but if the youth of America doesn't believe and we're not willing to sacrifice it, it just doesn't seem like we have that kind of a stomach. Can you help us on that?
If I were pessimistic about this country, I honestly would tell you, the only thing that gives me optimism is this generation. I think that it is going to compete with the World War II generation. I believe that this generation will be another greatest generation. And I say that from having spent so much time with this generation in contrast to spending time with the young generation of the 1960s and 70s, which I did too. That was, you took your life in your hand to represent the President of the United States at a university. I remember going back into a rental car and grabbing onto the steering wheel and think, I made it. I'm alive. There were a lot of beer cans frying, but I got to the end of the speech, and that's all that was needed to be a success. But that is not, well, it is true in some colleges, some universities, it is true. But certainly in the ones that I'm the most familiar with, and the one that I'm very much familiar with, Pepperdine, they're just absolutely superb. And I don't mean to say that they then therefore agree with everything that I say politically or everything that I say. I mean to say that they are, it's a pretty even mix, but all of them are very respectful, very open to real discussion. It's something that I hadn't seen for decades, and I love it, and I have great faith that this is another greatest generation. I mean, look at how the military is these days. I mean, no one dares to say anything about the military now, and they know it. They invented this terrible phrase. The ones who are opposed to us being in Iraq, Afghanistan, or anywhere, they'll say, well, I support the troops, but I don't support the mission. The mission is the troops. That is what you are. It would be like me saying to anyone here, what do you do during the day? And you tell me, you work so-and-so and you do so-and-so. And me saying, well, God, I think you're terrific, but I sure don't, well, what you're doing, I'm opposed to it. I mean, what it is, that's what you are. That's all you are, is your mission. And so when they say, but they invented that because they received so much grief over what they did to the Vietnam veterans during the war and when they came home. They received so much grief that they had to say, God, we're humane. Yeah, so they invented this phrase, and they continue to use it. I despise that phrase because I think it's a piece of hypocrisy. Anything
Sir,
else?
we
Yes, sir.
won the Tet Offensive in '68. The American people told that we lost and the war was over. Your comments.
I'm sorry, what was that?
In 1968, there was a Tet Offensive, which we won.
Yes.
But the American people were told we lost and the war is over.
absolutely.
Just your thoughts.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on the Tet Offensive. Of course we won. Walter Cronkite was chief among the ones who said that we lost, and even told stories that were not true, that the Viet Cong made it into the embassy. It did not. It never made it into the embassy at all. There was one Viet Cong who was killed on the lawn of the embassy, but he never made it to the embassy. But I think it was Walter Cronkite who said they got the first floor of the embassy. It was, look, the Tet Offensive, they were celebrating in the Johnson administration, at the White House, and at the Defense Department. But the celebrations didn't last long because the media in those days were, three stations, ABC, CBS, and NBC, three networks. That was it. And they all said the same song, that it was a terrible, terrible defeat and we better get out of there. You're absolutely right. It was a great victory. They had thought that they could win Vietnam in a day on Tet. The enemy did. And they had tremendous, tremendous casualties. They took one city, Hue. That's it. But boy, and they made a massacre out of that. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Sandy, you do this. Yeah.
How's it going? It's an honor to be here today, Bruce. First time meeting, reading. I've heard about your book, and I am a representative of the Youth of America. And and my name's John, and I attend Northwood High School. And at a young age, or not even within the last year or so, I didn't even find myself into politics. But as attending school and noticing how the youth was developing in a more democratic way, I've noticed that this country and the youth doesn't seem like there's that patriotism that it's there, but I think that there needs to be, I don't know how to put this, but more what it means to be a citizen of America and the pride that people are, and again, it's there, but I just want to say that, and I do my part at my school. I watch Fox News, follow Glenn Beck, and, oh yeah, that's right. And, no, I was just thinking, yeah. And at a young age, I feel like I can do more, but I can do my part by spreading the word, and I like to call myself like the Glenn Beck of Northwood High School, because, because it seems like all my teachers, and I've noticed it, and it's almost, and I want to call it indoctrination of the youth, I believe, in the schools. I mean, I read a lot of the stuff when we did our a major essay on Vietnam. It was more of how it was almost as if we're a burden to South Vietnam. I mean, in the war efforts with going on, and innocent civilians killed, but people like to forget about the tyrannical leaders and all the.
Excuse me, what were you taught about Vietnam?
Oh, in an essay we had to write in school, how it feels like if we're being portrayed as almost the bad guy and stuff, and how.
Who was portrayed as a bad guy?
Well, the U.S. involvement in
The
Vietnam.
U.S.,
That's
okay.
What, yeah.
Okay. I assumed that.
Yeah, and so what I'm just saying is, I'm trying to do my job of spreading the word, and trying to get people to realize a lot of these issues that are going on that people don't like to think are real problems in America.
Gotcha.
But me and my cousin, we represent the youth of America, and what would be some words that, how can I say this, to try to, what would be the most important thing that the youth of America should know that, I know, seriously, it's,
Yeah, I think I can answer that. First, I appreciate so much what you said.
He's also running for office.
You bet, run for office. For sure, run for office. And also, thanks for giving what I said credibility by proving what the young generation is, another greatest generation. I can say it, but you just proved it. And when you say what statement or what can I say, I'm going to do a very unusual thing. At the Nixon Library, I'm going to quote John Kennedy, and I'm positive that President Nixon, who I feel always when I'm here and even when I'm not here, is here. And I'm positive he'd be delighted that I'm quoting this phrase of President Kennedy. In his inaugural address, get this, because this really says everything there is to say about foreign policy. He said, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we'll pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty."
Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for one more question, and it is right here.
Okay.
I wanted to know, did you advise the president or help in the planning of the very successful 1970 incursion into Cambodia?
I'm so sorry. The acoustics, when it comes from that side, I'm afraid I have a difficult time with.
I just want to know, did you advise the president or did you help in the planning of the incursion into Cambodia in 1970?
No, I did not. No, I did not, but I certainly was all for it, very much all for it, and he did exactly the right thing. People will still call it the secret bombing or the secret, whatever they want to call it, of Cambodia. Prince Sihanouk wanted President Johnson to go after the North Vietnamese who were in Cambodia, what's called the Parrot Speak area and another area close by. He had said to President Johnson that if he has to take hot pursuit into Cambodia to do it, when the president did it, he told the who was it, the head of the Armed Forces Committee of both the Senate and the House, and the Armed Forces and the not the Armed Forces, another committee in both the Senate and the House. He told them what he was doing, but to keep it a secret. The reason he wanted to keep it a secret is because Prince Sihanouk wanted to keep it secret, because if it was public, China would then know that Prince Sihanouk is allied with the United States, and that would hurt Cambodia, that was posing as a neutral nation. I have this, and I hope better said, in the book, and with dates and all of that. But it was a secret from the public, and it was a secret from the world, because it had to be a secret. It just had, may I just say one thing about secrecy? It's a funny story. Do you mind? I want to say a funny story about secrecy. Okay. I believe that there are times when presidents have the right to keep a secret. When I got the job at the White House, I had already made an obligation to do something, a speech in New York, and I remember it was at the Hilton, about, I don't know, USIA, I guess, because I went from USIA and then I went to the White House. And so I asked at the White House, is it okay if I give this speech? And it was just a week after I got the job. So I gave the speech, and there was a question from the floor saying, do you think it was right for President Kennedy to lie about the Bay of Pigs and say the CIA had nothing to do with it? And I said, yeah, I do. I said, I'm not here to defend President Kennedy. I work for President Nixon. But sure I do. And I said, and President Eisenhower with the U-2, I said, there are times when a president has to. He doesn't want to. He wouldn't have to if we had some kind of a wall around the United States. But everything that the president says goes to every country. He would have been telling Castro. He would have been telling Khrushchev that we were involved, that the CIA, which you never confirm or deny. So I said, sure. And that was it. Then I go back home on to D.C. the following morning on the shuttle, the plane, and I'm reading the New York Times, and there's a little headline on an article, and it says, Nixon aide says, okay for president to lie. Okay. I saw this and I thought, what jerk? What jerk said this? And I'm reading the article, and of course the jerk was me. And it never really explained very well what I was talking about. And I thought, God, the first thing I got to do is I got to, say I surrender. I did this. So I go to the White House and I go to Bob Haldeman's office, another great man, great man. And I went to him and he sort of smiled when he came in, but then he made sure I didn't see the smile linger. And he said, I see you made the New York Times this morning. And so I said, yeah, I said, I just apologize for that. He said, look, let me tell you something. He said, let me see your name in that article. So I started looking for it, and it was pretty low in the article. I said, here it is. He said, yeah, he says, no one reads that far, He said, the headline says it all. Nixon aide says, okay for president to lie. That's all they care. They care about you as a Nixon aide. They don't care about you or your name. Remember, as long as you're here, everything that you do, you are doing in the name of President Nixon. And he was marvelous, and so was the president marvelous about it. But boy, I sure learned quick. Be careful where you put your commas and your periods when you're talking. Remember that someone's going to quote you out of context, and if you're working for the President of the United States, if you're working for anyone, you are their mouthpiece, whether you want to be or not. It's something that I'll never forget about CPC.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's no secret that the reason we always attract great headline speakers, it isn't to sell books, it isn't because of an enthusiastic audience, it's because we give lavish gifts. And those of you who have been here before know that. And so does Bruce, that's why he's here. And today is no exception. We have, yes, see, he's Bruce, you're gonna get it. A beautiful commemorative mug that celebrates our 20th anniversary. And folks, these, yes, before you ask, they are for sale in our gift shop. They are available not only in mug form, but as magnets, keychains, boxer shorts, t-shirts, polos, jackets. We shamelessly sell merchandise to enable us to do the good work that we do. So it's a limited edition, limited to the number we can sell, and it's my pleasure to present this, minus the price tag, because I have the good taste and judgment to take that off. I present this to Bruce. Bruce. Congratulations.
So last year, this is all I got.
Well, it was a low-budget year.
Thank you.
You all have this. You were given this, so please pick one up if you didn't on the way out, and join us on Thursday for Earth Day for the panel discussion from 1:30 to 2:30. And meanwhile, please join us in the lobby where we're going to scoot Bruce out to so he can meet all of you. I hope you'll go to the museum store and buy this great book that he's been commenting on and that you've been asking questions about, An American Amnesia. It is for sale right now as we speak in our gift store. Thank you for coming. Please come back.